without further ado, another very, very exciting, important topic. It's something that you've told us you want to learn more about, find out what is going on in the world of AI and AI governance. So here we are, our CEO, Martin, taking you through AI governance in action, structuring the AI supply chain for success. Take it away, Martin.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Sorry for my voice. It is early morning over here in New Zealand. Today I'm going to speak to you about AI governance. You might have already heard a lot about governance. It is the theme of the conference this year. And I guess I want to close it off with, the hot topic of the year, the last 2 years at least, is AI and sort of how that affects us and what we need to do as large organizations want to adopt enterprise. So my name is Martin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tyk. I have a Blue Sky account. I do not tweet much, but I do have one. And then also my LinkedIn is here if you want to get in touch. Feel free to reach out, obviously. So let's kick it off. I want you to think about how a modern smartphone is built. Smartphones contain thousands of different parts, and how a vendor chooses to integrate those parts falls into one of two camps. In one camp, companies like Apple, which tries to control almost everything in the iPhone that is critical to its value from hardware to software. And in the other camp, we have every Android mobile vendor, this ecosystem of different manufacturers, chip makers, app developers, with even those apps available through multiple storefronts. In an iPhone, very few features are replaceable. In an Android device, depending on your model, almost every software feature is customizable and replaceable, and there is a very large market for third-party parts and components. Now, what if I told you that AI is headed down a similar path? And we are at an inflection point where the market will bifurcate into two similar camps: the all-encompassing bet on AGI, so artificial general intelligence, versus an open market of tooling. I'll get to that bit in a minute. First, I need you to get good and bored so I can talk to you about AI governance. Because when it comes to the enterprise, it's incredibly important for precisely the reason that the AI supply chain is important. When we talk about AI governance, we often get stuck on the high-level ethics and existential risks like bias and alignment problems. These are definitely real and should certainly go into your decision-making process. You know, for a great example, go online and search for Grok 3's recent system prompt change. It's very interesting. Or the whole controversy about DeepSeek-specific geopolitical biases. No, so those are important, but today I want to talk to you about something far more tangible: the supply chain that actually makes AI work in the enterprise. This is something you can affect now. So ask yourself, who controls AI in the enterprise? Should businesses be locked into a single vendor's AI ecosystem, or should they have the flexibility to mix and match AI models, tools, platforms to suit their needs, much like any software problem? Now, this is a pretty old question when it comes to the tech industry. Any CIOs in the audience will cringe when they hear this, but it's called shadow IT, and AI is not immune to it. So let's just walk through some of the key questions a business needs to ask itself when it's dealing with AI. So first of all, flexibility. This is something most IT managers are familiar with. And platforming makes sense in the days of the SaaS enterprise, the SaaS company, the SaaS vendor. You don't just buy one product. If a vendor can, they want you to buy their whole ecosystem, right? Some AI providers want to be the one-stop shop for AI that captures the most value from the customer and that builds moats. It's been said before, but that first mover advantage and the technological advances in AI are not a moat in the world of AI. This has been proven out by semi-open source models like Llama, DeepSeek, Mistral. So while OpenAI absolutely pushes the boundary of the state of the art, the academic research and practice of how to create these incredibly advanced models is out there, free to anyone who can understand it. Now, it's all about the cohort of the supporting features and integrations that really drive the value of the overriding platform. That's the SaaS way. You build the engine and then a platform of cohorts to surround it, and then you capture the whole market and make it very hard to leave. On the other hand, and increasingly in this economy, businesses really need modularity. If you're locked into one ecosystem, how do you adapt when a better model comes along, or a cheaper provider appears, or more importantly, when your own tactics and strategy shifts over time? And this is a critical choice when evaluating vendor adoption, composability, and flexibility. Next, an enterprise needs to ask itself, who owns your AI output? AI models are black boxes. How do you ensure sensitive data isn't leaked or misused by a vendor? Once that data leaves your network, it's fair game. You can only control what you control, and a SaaS vendor is ultimately just someone else's PC. More concerningly, most terms of service are flexible and can be changed at any time. And there's no enforcement or verification except for standards bodies in terms of providing trust. Of course, in an enterprise agreement, the lawyers spend inordinate amounts of time building out safeguards, but ultimately that's just a piece of paper. It's not really the same confidence you get when you do things yourself, right? It's a really common problem. As I said earlier, now companies are struggling with shadow AI. Employees are using unauthorized AI tools and exposing these organizations to data leaks, where suddenly some document that was optimized with an AI tool becomes fodder for a recommendation engine on someone else's IDE. There's a classic example, should be playing, thank you. There's a classic example of GitHub Copilot when it first launched, spitting out the famous sort of inverse square root function from id Software's Quake game. It's a really well-written, optimized square root function. It's quite cool, but it's odd that it came out verbatim with sweary comments and all, and a weird license. Anyway, last but not least, an organization needs to always consider efficiency when it comes to new tooling, and AI is more like a virus than a consolidated solution at the moment. So if you speak to your CIO or IT manager, you'll hear them say things like, our teams are deploying AI in silos. Finance uses one model, customer support uses another, IT another with no central oversight. Or we have hundreds of POCs all over the organization and nobody knows what anyone else is doing. That's shadow IT at work. Just with AI. It's not limited to one vocation either. It's everywhere in every department. And this is just inefficient. It's costly. Do you really think, but the real question is here, the first thing people will go to is centralization. Do you really think centralizing and using a single vendor is better or even realistic? I mean, we're talking about large enterprises here, with multiple subsidiaries. Large organizations deal with shadow IT as a problem that is solved through consolidation. But at much larger levels, it's simply counterproductive. So quite a lot of organizations have come up with a way to just embrace it. Similar to the whole bring your own device movement, we already see it in API management, as you've seen during this conference, with federated APIM. The idea is really simple. Use what you want, when you want, just tell us about it first, and maybe try using what we already have. The tricky part is you can only do this if you have oversight. And if that isn't the case, then these shadow use cases become uncontrollable. Now, we're talking specifically about AI here, and we've identified the risk factors that come with AI adoption. So let's dive a little deeper into what constitutes building, the sort of building blocks of AI adoption, because that'll sort of set the stage. There are 4 key areas that come into consideration when adopting AI. The first one is vendors, the actual AI models, so OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, etc. Then you have interfaces. These are the applications where AI is used. So chatbots, developer tool IDEs, enterprise dashboards, assistants, code completion, word completion, sentence completion. That's the second part. The third one is data. And this is actually the lifeblood that makes AI useful, because you have to ground your AI. As smart as the model is, it doesn't know anything about your company. So these are your internal documents, customer interactions, any logs you've made, things like that. that you want to feed in and make use of in order to have the power of the AI do some cool stuff with it. And the last one is tooling, the sort of governance layer that manages all of this stuff. So monitoring, security, and compliance. All of these components will come into play when trying to add value or improve performance of a process. The building blocks of AI tooling, let's say, let's take a real world scenario. Let's, imagine a financial firm deploying AI for customer support. They need a model, maybe GPT-4o. They need an internal knowledge base, which they have to use for reference. This might be searchable. It could be a vector database. And then on top of that, they need compliance guardrails to ensure accuracy, to make sure that the recommendations they're making, whether internal or external, are accurate. Now, these components are a pipeline, and it looks like this. The user uses an interface. The interface is either a custom app or some kind of portal, or a little system, some kind of chatbot in your application. That pulls data from a database to enhance and ground its responses from the model. And if it's an integration or an action-oriented process, like we can do stuff, it also serves up the tooling, so the integrations that the LLM can use to perform actions if it decides they are warranted. Pretty simple. I mean, at the highest level, obviously, interfaces, this particular section, there's a whole host of complexity there, including, but not limited to, a hard integration with its two dependencies there. And this is where I wanted to introduce the concept of the AI supply chain. In every other industry, manufacturing, software, shipping, supply chains enable specialization and flexibility. And in my humble opinion, AI should work the same way. This pipeline we have here is under the hood, essentially just a bunch of API calls. This is an API management conference. We've got to talk about APIs. AI is ultimately given value and purpose by the agency and knowledge it is given by its user. And the underlying transport for that knowledge and agency is the humble API call. Now, I'm not sure how many of you fine folks remember the horrors of early API standardization. Yeah, I'm talking SOAP and XML and the WS star standards that erupted when enterprise vendors decided they needed to standardize, but still wanted to carve out niches of their own. Now, we've come a long way since then. We've got the Open API spec for transportable API definitions, the async API spec attempting to do the same thing for real-time APIs. We still don't have a single unifying standard, but what we do have, at least in most cases, are APIs that are still usable by the humble human with some rudimentary tooling, and without the need for massive libraries or SDKs to build integration. We also have industry-wide standardization, for example, with standards like open banking. Suddenly, financial interoperability has created this massive flexibility in the fintech industry and ballooned the amount of cool things you can do with your financial apps, all because of standardization. Like banking, AI APIs are a bit different. They are a class of APIs that are inherently similar. Most LLMs take the same parameters to tune their input. The more advanced ones have space for different input types. So if they're multimodal, they take images, audio, video, etc. And then some more have this fantastic tool use capability where they can make a function call on your machine or on your server and actually do something with the world. This here, for example, is an OpenAI API call. And if you look at this, let's say, compared to the Anthropic one, I haven't got an example here, they look really similar. They have all the same components, but they're still just different enough to need a custom integration with that LLM, even though the output generally is the same. Now, actually, I think one of these companies is actually leading here. I mean, speaking of Anthropic, an example that really promotes the supply chainization of the AI ecosystem, and something I'm quite excited about, is Anthropic's model context protocol. It provides this clean approach to adding tooling and extensions to an AI model. And moreover, it provides those extensions to the tooling that provides the interface to that model. So it's a way to integrate with the user's own machine and the accessible services. So for example, as we said earlier, the interface is a key component in how we interact with the AI, and the MCP makes it easy for the interface to interact with the world around it. Now, there's some nuance to this, but ultimately, all it really does is decouple a chunk of the context work for LLM calls. To explain, the MCP defines and standardizes the interfaces between the LLM interface and the tools and data sources that are available. So if your tool speaks MCP, then it can be registered with the interface and made available to the LLM. And if you're using another interface, maybe an IDE or an integrated assistant, and if that speaks MCP, MCP is Model Context Protocol, the Anthropic protocol I was talking about earlier. If your interface speaks MCP, then you can register that service again with that interface, and it instantly becomes available to that LLM. So you can swap interfaces and take your tooling with you. So you've got this transportability of tooling. And this is like an excellent first step towards making the data supply side of context management, or this upstream part of the supply chain, more modular and much more flexible for tool creators to get involved and supply value into the wider AI ecosystem. So this kind of hyper specialization that we see in modern supply chain. But it's only a first step. What I'd really like to see from LLM vendors is a standardization of their downstream interfaces, so the actual API calls to the service, and in turn, potentially even between LLMs. At the moment, everything has to be routed through the interface. Now, this isn't something that needs to be set in stone. I'm not saying we need to standardize everything across the AI market, but we should find some kind of common baseline that can make completion standard between vendors and doesn't rely on glue code from things like LangChain, which is a very popular Python library to interact with LLMs and standardize that access. Now, AGI, artificial general intelligence advocates might say, why not just let the AI write the glue code and live with that? And you know what? That's totally a potential future. Probably not in scope for this talk, but the other future I foresee is agents building glue code, nano services, deploying them to fast platforms, so functions as a service platforms like Lambda, and then just using endless iterations of those to handle whatever tasks they're trying to achieve. You know, we assume that AGI will be efficient and optimal and perfect, but it's been trained on the sum of human knowledge, and people are really messy. So it will undoubtedly pick up bad habits from us, including spaghetti code. So, which is why, ultimately, I think that to get real value from your AI journey, an enterprise needs solid governance. I'll unpack that now. So let's go through how a modular AI supply chain works for an enterprise. Companies want the ability to swap AI models with or providers without major disruptions. So this is super tricky, not just from an operational perspective with all the different API types and clients. Try accessing AWS Bedrock without using their SDK. It's impossible without using their SDK. But also from a behavioral perspective, since LLMs ultimately do behave very differently depending on their type. So, as an example, transformer models like GPT-4o and Claude are very different to how, let's say, GPT-o3 and DeepSeek work, because those models are trained to pre-think in their responses, and so they're slower, and their answers are usually much, much longer. Less good for tool use and actions, but great for agents. And we'll talk about agents in a minute. I mean, there's also the issue of bias. So do you want a based LLM to talk to your customers? Alignment and bias are a serious downstream problem, and there needs to be a better, more standardized way to work with it. For example, to manage bias in OpenAI's GPT-4 or with Llama, Meta's LLM, you can use something called a fine tune, which you have to train yourself, and it sort of layers on top of the model. You need to create and train that yourself and test it yourself, but then you can't move that fine tune from one vendor to another. You need to do this training process each time with your new LLM. And again, something like that would be an ideal candidate for standardization and plugging into the AI supply chain. It'd be really hard to do. I mean, I'm not saying I know how to do it, but it's one of those components that's highly specialized. And there's some serious value to be unlocked that won't be as well served from an all or nothing vendor strategy. If there's specialists just doing this, you suddenly get a lot more choice. So when it comes to your AI governance model, you need to have a strong opinion on how you want to tackle the issues. Moreover, you need processes and tooling to make swapping LLMs easier. That's why AI supply chains, where different vendors provide specialized components, are critical. Two, businesses must ensure AI is used with the right data, by the right people, using the right tools, not just handing everything to one vendor. This downstream component of the supply chain is where the magic sauce is that really makes your AI adoption work for you. So you've amassed a whole bunch of customer product, market, and operational data. If you're really data-driven enterprise, you may even have a decent data strategy and have data warehouses with structured data ready for processing. If you can supply this data to AIs, you can unlock all kinds of productivity bonuses for all of your departments. But the ultimate risk is that data leakage that I spoke about earlier. A good governance framework, standards, and tooling should help provide confidence to management and security teams that the data being sent to LLM vendors is not ending up in a training set or in a log somewhere outside of your locus of control. Lastly, and this goes hand in hand with choice, I needed 3 C's for this, that's why it's changeability. Is changeability, the flexibility to be able to build workflows that do not require your workforce to have to completely change how they work. One of the wonders of AI is how easy it is to interact with, since it's just like speaking to a person. However, you really do not want to make everything live in a chat window. Chat is a terrible interface for procedural work. And ultimately, you want to be able to integrate tooling anywhere you need it. I mean, that was the promise of APIs, right? And it shouldn't require a chat box to work with it. So in your governance decisions, you need to find out how you can embed AI seamlessly into your existing processes and evaluate that. So sorry, folks, but I do need to pitch this. If you haven't, oh, no, sorry. But I do need to show this. You might have been to our AI Studio workshop done by Leon. I'm not sure if you were there or not, but I think we'll probably make the recording available. But I can't take this opportunity without a shameless plug for our newest addition to the Tyk platform, the Tyk AI Studio. At Tyk, we believe that enterprises need a governance gateway that lets you control which AI models can be accessed and by whom, flexibility to use multiple AI models without vendor lock-in, and a security-first AI adoption with built-in compliance, budgeting, and observability. With Tyk AI Studio, businesses can route AI requests, enforce policies, and own their AI supply chain, choosing the best vendors for their needs. Get in touch, if you want to see it in action. We believe it works hand in hand with your APIM strategy as you end up having to manage more and more AI interactions in your business. Remember to like and subscribe. It's kind of sounding like a YouTube pitch. Anyway, that's enough of that. Okay, let's move on. Twice now. The future. So some future gazing, because I'm CEO. Sorry, but are you telling me to get off? He is. He's like, get off. There's a hook coming from my neck.
I'll be back in a minute. Don't worry. Go ahead.
So some future gazing. Where are we realistically headed? So first off, despite the hype, LLMs aren't replacing the workforce. Instead, they'll integrate into every software tool we use. If we do this right, there is an opportunity for a vast ecosystem of suppliers to drive innovation and productivity of AI amongst organizations. And over the next 5 years, I expect to see more staff working alongside AI, openly, and not just on their laptops, but out and about in more traditional areas of the economy. Secondly, we're already seeing the rise of AI agents. It's the next big hype train at the moment for AI, but it's basically mainly because if you use multiple LLMs in narrow scopes and have them interact, they can be extremely productive. It also distracts from the ever-moving promise of the emergence of artificial general intelligence by the very vendors trying to create it. Because you can get agents to be incredibly powerful, and you don't need AGI to still be useful, to be able to have that fantastic dream of getting stuff done for you by a computer. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be paying attention. Agents are going to become the workhorses for integrations and automations. I believe they'll be at the core of the larger productivity leaps we'll see amongst workforces in the near future. And just FYI, at Tyk, we have migration tools from other vendors that are all agent-driven. So we've been making use of agents for a while now. Thanks, Leon. You rock, by the way. because he built them. Last but not least, I see this AI supply chain evolving, whether supported or instigated by vendors or not. Industry will demand better and more normalized access to value-added tools, capabilities, and functions, and businesses will evolve out of the myriad requirements that come with AI adoption. For AI vendors, I believe in order to secure a vibrant and growing future for this market, at some form of normalization of interfaces and design patterns is critical. Enterprise consumers do not need the Apple of AI, they need the Android of AI, the highly distributed, many-faceted, highly competitive market that can drive not only adoption, but real tangible value for the enterprise and the consumer. Talking about agents, vibes-based coding is totally a thing. It's essentially what coding with an AI assistant is at the moment. If you haven't tried it already, if you're not using stringent workflow, it is really vibes-based. It's quite cool. In the longer term, as agentic systems become more prevalent, I 100% expect to see agents writing and deploying their own interface code into organization ecosystems to extend or enable their reach. And where we'll see this eruption of nano services sitting in our clouds, providing nuggets of functionality to agents running specific task sets. And it's going to be really messy without sufficient oversight. So to close off, I'll leave you with this. AI is the new electricity. It's terrifying, and it's got such a promising future. Even just in its current state, we do not need to wait for better models or AGI tomorrow. AI is already extremely powerful when harnessed correctly. However, enterprises need a structured supply chain to harness this power effectively. Ultimately, it will be the business use cases that will drive proliferation. The future should not be one AI to do everything under the sun. It's AI working within structured, governed ecosystems with us at the helm. So if you're thinking about AI in your enterprise, the question isn't which AI model should I use, it's how do we structure our AI supply chain to stay flexible, secure, and scalable. And I hate to tell you this, but your AI supply chain is an API problem. So come talk to us because we know APIs. And you can't have AI without APIs. Thank you. And I hope you enjoyed the conference. I'm sorry I went over time.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Fantastic session, by the way. So much to unpack there as well. I think just understanding of how supply chains work, especially when you put this particular context, that's really, really great. So I think probably the perfect way to end the final session for today. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got a lot of time for questions because we're going to go into the closing remarks, which Martin will also be a part of. But there's an interesting question here, which is there someone I can chat with for 5 minutes about Tyk AI Studio? So it looks like there is a bit of an interest there. Maybe we'll reach out to you directly via chat on the in the lobby, and get someone on that for a conversation, perhaps. So, if that's all right, yeah.
Sophie's also shared a
Awesome.
link there, which you can get in touch with us on.
Exactly. So maybe that works out. We're going to be off for the closing remarks, which is essentially just a few announcements, next steps, a little bit of a highlight of what happened today, and hopefully a call to action for everybody who's attended to take that next step, take that leap towards your API governance journey. So over to the final segment. I'll see you there. Thanks a lot, Martin. Fantastic.